Greetings, friends. Greetings from the great outdoors. However, it's only about 3 feet from my back deck. In fact, I'm on my back deck right now, and it's so nice to be outside. A lot of us have been inside, and that's precisely why I'm doing these Q&A sessions just for you, so that you can excel in being creative and staying creative, even though a lot of us, in fact, pretty much the world, are very wisely staying inside. So I'm offering Q&A sessions, photo, even video, and lenses, cameras, apps, anything that you want. I'm happy to help out. Thanks for joining, everybody, and just going to give you a nice little wave. Thanks for the waves, everyone. Tasneem Mohammed, how are you doing? I'm doing really good compared to what I guess maybe last week, when a lot of us were in this transition period of, wow, staying at home. It's certainly very different emotionally, isn't it? However, I have good family around me, and that's really, really nice. And for those who don't have family, especially as today is Easter, Sunday Easter, thoughts and prayers go out to you. And also for those who are celebrating Passover these 2 weeks, I believe. I hope you stay well. Thanks everybody for joining. Feel free to ask any questions, and also there's a little question mark icon below that you can press, or just write it in the text message here in the comment section. How's your quarantine going? Hope you're safe. Yes, it's going well as well as it could be, and I do feel privileged, or blessed is a better word, because I do have a certain amount of greenery behind my house. So I'm on my deck right now, and it's really nice to get out to be able to talk to all you guys. Arun Katil, hi. Hello back to you, my friend. Yusuf, the post on Facebook, lend me here. Thanks for notifying. Yes, I'm happy to do so. And Yusuf, what I'll be doing pretty much every day at 12 o'clock Toronto time is doing photo Q&A sessions, and you're more than welcome to join. Please do, in fact, and ask me any questions that you want. Mike Robichaux, good to see you. So I'm going to start out with a couple questions that I actually, let me back up. Yesterday was a great session. I had so many questions. I didn't get nearly all of them answered. So I want to make sure that if you are here today and you didn't get your question answered yesterday, please ask again. I'm happy to help. R.S. Shutter, sir, why do you prefer mostly black and white compositions in street photography? Oh, what a great question. Street photography, the history of street photography is black and white. And the reason being is because when street photography first started, well, to be honest, street photography is pretty much the beginning of photography. However, it's traditionally been black and white film because there was no color film prior to, well, popularly used prior to the 60s. I know that there was color film prior to that, but really color came into its essence in the 1960s. And before that, street photography was sort of a central genre of photography. In fact, the first couple photos were of street scenes, or we would call them cityscapes. And because it has such a long history in black and white film, street photographers, professional street photographers, prefer to continue in black and white. And there's another reason as well. When you strip out color, all that you're left with is what's called form. And form, when we're talking about form in an artistic sense, is relying on design, composition, and of course, quality of light to create the impact of the image. There's no color. Color can be used as a crutch. Now, when saying that, I want to make it clear, I love color. In fact, if you look through my Instagram page and profile, you'll see that I have a ton of color photos. In fact, San Miguel de Allende, one of my favorite places in the world, I hardly do any black and white there. It's all color. However, when I'm doing street photography, I love form. I love to explore light, black and white. It's very simple, and that simplicity brings about a certain amount of compositional, what would you say, compositional clarity, potency, authority, and beauty? Very prosaic. That's a great question. Thank you. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Can you please explain underwater photography and lighting? Yes, I love that question. What I do when I have to do underwater photography commercially, and I don't do it recreationally, mainly because the water that I'm actually an East Coaster, so I could go out in the water, but I live on what's called the Bay of Fundy, and it's really muddy and dirty, and so I never even tried it. However, in rivers, we have a very popular salmon fishing river called the Miramichi, and I was hired once to do underwater photography. So I rented a casing, underwater casing for my specific camera, and back then I think it was the 5D Mark III, if I recall, and it's fully operational. And I don't bother with lighting. Forget lighting. It's too complex. Just use natural lighting. However, what you will probably do is go to cloudy setting, and that's in your white balance. And cloudy setting counteracts the bluishness that you will encounter underwater. I hope that helps. Okay, Yusuf says, I use Lightroom for iPad. You really should have used it as well, maybe on your iPhone. How do you find image post-processing on it? I mean, is it as good as the PC version? Yes. In fact, Yusuf, that's a great question, because I would say half of the photos that I edit within Lightroom CC are done on the mobile version. And the reason I trust that is because it's the exact same functionality. The tools are the same. The only difference is you have a smaller screen. Now, I have what's called a Max Pro, 11 Max Pro, or 11 Pro Max, sorry, with the iPhone. And that screen is big enough for me to see and to get detail and do all the editing I need to do. However, a lot of people think or feel that it's still too small, so they would prefer to use an iPad. And if you're wondering about what the difference is between the iPad version and the desktop version of Lightroom CC, the desktop version has a few advantages, and that would be the ability to do HDR and also various automated features like HDR panoramics and so on. And I assume that will eventually come over to the iPad, the tablet, the Android, the iPhone version at some point. But as for now, whenever I need to do HDRs or panos, I just do them in my desktop. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much the same functionality, which is really good news. Excellent question. Okay. Simone Bates, welcome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. And if you're just joining, you don't know what we're doing a live Q&A session. So feel free to ask anything that you want. Mark, greetings from Boris Chachava. Awesome. Good to see you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Sir, I'm a beginner. I wanted to try light and shadow techniques in portrait shots. Will you give some tips on it? Yes. Yeah. So the easy way and the best way to do portraits, if you want people to look good for, say, a business card or business profile or a family portrait or something, is to have even lighting. And of course, that would be shadow lighting, or that would be using a window when it's north facing or it's overcast, so you don't have direct sunlight. Now, for example, take a look at me right now. This is not a very good portrait session. Can you guess why? Take a look at my bald head. You can see that it's terrible lighting. However, what's really unique about backlighting is if your subject matter has hair, unlike me, then this hot spot's not going to be there. And do you see how my face is really softly lit? Now, it's true that I'm in shadow. Then you would probably add a little bit of warmth to the picture after the fact, and that's okay. But whenever we're dealing with portraits, if you can have the sun coming from behind the person, that provides a really good soft shot. Now, that's not the question you're asking, but I'm just giving you a little bit of background for those who just started to watch. The lower the sun is into the sky, the less this problem will happen. In fact, if the sun was lower, if it was morning, the sun would be hitting back here and there wouldn't be that glowing hot spot on my head, which would be ideal. Now, when you're ready to get into really cool fine art portraiture with dark shadows and slivers of light on one side of the head, that's when you're getting into strobes. And if you have a flash that you can take off your camera, I suggest you go to www.strobist.com, and that's strobist.com. And strobist.com allows you, or it gives you, so many great resources on how to create what's called low-key portraiture. Low-key portraiture is usually very interesting because there's such deep shadows and usually only slivers of people's faces. Now, I will admit this is extremely hard to do with natural light, because with natural light we have a lot of bounce. Now, the reason why I'm illuminated here, the sun's coming from behind me, but take a look what we have here. I'm just going to see how my house has very light colored shingles or siding. And that's actually bouncing light back into my face. That's why you can see me even though the sun is far behind me. So with regards to your desire to have really cool light, I'd go to strobist.com and practice using off-camera flash. Great question. Okay, let's see what else we have. Just scrolling here. Can you please explain about macro photography? I'd be happy to. So macro photography is usually with what's called a macro lens, obviously. That's nothing new. However, macro lenses come in various focal lengths. And you can get them usually wide angle, like 35 millimeters sometimes. I've even seen them even wider, but I don't think that's so necessary. Usually you're going to get a 40 millimeter macro lens, a 60 millimeter macro lens, a 55 millimeter. But then again, you can actually get macro lenses that are in the 100 range as well. And the value of a macro lens is that you can see, usually, depending on the lens, items at 1-to-1 ratio. That means that if you photograph an ant that's going by you, that ant in the picture will pretty much, you'll be able to see it huge on your screen, essentially. And that is valuable for anyone who wants to do flower photography, to get really cool abstract shots of the flowers and, of course, insects. The only problem is that these lenses are expensive, so I advise buying used lenses, or to start out, get what's called a close-up or a macro filter. Now, these filters are very inexpensive. Sometimes they're only $10 a piece, and they screw on your lens to allow you to get into macro photography for cheap. And then when you find that you really like it, then you can invest in a macro lens. Now, when you're actually shooting with macro, I suggest a tripod. I suggest manual focus. This is critical. Autofocus won't work. You'll just get frustrated. Or it will work sometimes, but manual focus is key. That's why we use a tripod. Okay? Aperture priority f/22 is probably good if you want to get as much in focus as possible. However, if you're only looking for like a really beautiful abstract shot of a flower, I think they're called stamens or whatever, the middle part of a flower, then you would focus on that, you would go to f8. I think that anything less than f8 is probably going to be too much background blur. However, that's the beauty of it. You can certainly experiment with the macro lens. Okay, hope that helps. Okay, Prasant, good to hear from you, my friend. Sir, in my new Canon 77D, it has 45 focusing points. I'm trying to shoot all the time in AV, aperture priority. But sir, can you throw some light on focusing points? Yes. Don't be concerned about the focusing points. When you buy your camera, by default, you have, some camera companies call it differently. Some call it wide, some call it intelligent. And depending on the company that you have, essentially what's happening is the camera intelligently is searching for focus points that it feels is the best for you. Therefore, it will intelligently look for a face. It will focus on the face. it will intelligently look for things that are closer to the camera rather than further away, and it'll focus on that. I would say leave it alone. Don't bother altering it, because 90% of the time it's going to be accurate. And I know this because I've used Canon cameras. I've used Canon cameras for years. And even the ones that are far older than your 77D did an awesome job at I just let the focus go by itself, and it really worked well. Now, there are exceptions. The exceptions are close-ups. The exceptions are very close headshots for fashion where you want to dial in on an eyeball. And then what you will do is you'll tell your Canon that you want eye detection or eye focus priority. You can also tell your Canon that you want face priority. This is really valuable. Now, if you're not doing faces and you're doing other things like flower photography or whatever, or maybe landscape, and you don't want the camera to focus on those flowers in front of you, but the distant mountain or the tree, then you can certainly switch to what's called center focusing or spot focusing, not to be confused by center weighted metering or spot metering. And this is where you just tell your camera where to focus by moving what's called your command dial. And your command dial is left and right, up and down. It's on the back of your Canon. And just give that a try, but just take a look through your manual. I'm not sure about the 77D. I haven't used that particular model myself. And you'll be able to control the focus point. But just to wrap up your question, 99% of the time you'll be fine by default, where it's all these little dots are searching for the best focus. Okay, welcome everybody. We're doing a Q&A session. Feel free to join and ask any question. Hola from Phoenix. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Phoenix is a place I have yet to visit, but I would love to. I'd love to get down to Phoenix. Thanks for joining. Thanks everybody. Hand you some waves. Boris says, the best instructor. I appreciate that. Well, you're the best student. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody. It's great to see you all. Guntars, welcome. Just giving you guys waves because I appreciate you all. Yusuf, hey Mark, would you suggest the variable ND filters? There's a filter from K&F Concept. It's called ND4-400 and it's super practical. What's your opinion about those in general? Very good question. Now, for those who don't know what a variable ND filter is, it's quite an interesting invention, to be honest. And I've used them in the past where you can actually rotate this filter that goes on your lens. It looks dark. It actually looks like a polarizer. And it's constructed in a similar way to a polarizer, although not exactly the same. But when you rotate this filter, you have varying levels of darkness into your picture. And it's really quite incredible. In fact, the way that I can explain it best is, do any of you have glasses that automatically tint when you're in the sun? If you do, that's almost the exact same principle, at least in a, well, I'm sorry, it's physically not the same principle, but let's just pretend that you have those glasses. It's sunlight. You just walked out to the sun and they get very dark. Well, if you have a variable ND filter, you can rotate this, and as you rotate, the filter gets darker and darker and darker. And why is this valuable? Because you can dial in the exact amount of darkness that you want for things like waterfall pictures or fountain pictures or astrophotography where you want the shooting stars. So to answer your question, Yusuf, I think it's great. The only thing I've experienced, and I'm not sure if it's the same for your particular filter, is that it had a strange color shift. And that color shift was possibly because my filter wasn't so expensive. And they may have corrected that problem, the one that you have, I don't know. So just be aware of that. And also another thing I found was that the perimeter of my photo was a bit darker when I used that variable ND. So I kind of switched back to just using normal NDs. That's what I did. But if you have a variable, then keep using it. Pradeep, welcome. Hi all. Ileana, good to see you. Hope all is well in Mexico. Feel free to ask any questions, Ileana. Hi everybody. Okay, sir, can you please explain about filter in landscape photography? Yes, landscape photography. So I would use a polarizer filter if you're going to. If you don't have a polarizer filter, just make sure that while you're traveling with your camera, i.e. walking through the trail to get to your landscape, that you're using a protective filter called a UV filter. However, a lot of landscape photographers actually take those filters off when they're doing their picture. And the reason being is because they are super careful about having perfect sharpness. Landscape photographers are very, what would you say? They're super self-critical for a good reason. They use tripods. They use a remote release. They use 5, 10-second timers, 2-second timers. And they also, if they don't need a filter, they will take the filter off so it's just pure lens. Now, if they do want a filter, what they usually will do is use a polarizer to bring the blue sky even bluer, even darker, or the water to be bluer with less reflections. If you use a polarizer filter, you can actually reduce reflections in water to make the water appear more stunning. This is a really good effect from the polarizer. Now, prior to HDR and prior to digital, landscape photographers made heavy use of what's called a variable ND filter. And a variable ND filter goes on top of the lens, and the bottom part is clear, and the top part is dark with a certain amount of gradation. And this variable filter would allow the bright sky to be darkened, but the darker ground to be untouched. And this balanced out the brightness levels between sky and ground. This is very helpful. These days, it's not so common to use those because in Photoshop and other software, Lightroom, for example, you can actually combine images in HDR so you have perfect exposure in both the dark ground, the shadow areas, and the bright sky. Okay, so those are the two filters that landscape photographers have used in the past, and some are not using them anymore because of the advances in digital. Great question. Prashant says, thank you very much, sir. I'm very happy to help. Okay, Eunice, welcome. We're just doing a Q&A session. Feel free to ask anything that you want. Okay, so down below the question mark, I'm just going to tap on that. Rusted 78, I have a Fuji X-T30. I've already bought a 35mm prime, but lately I feel like I want another prime. Which would you suggest? Sorry, which would you recommend next? The 56mm. Rusted 78, there's a little problem with Instagram. It may be a problem with me not understanding it, but I can't read longer questions. So if you wouldn't mind just putting another question mark, putting another question just with the tail end of that question. I think you're looking for the 56, your question. Now, if you have the 35mm prime, that's a 50mm for your lens, a 50mm equivalent. Now, if anyone doesn't know what that means, we always judge focal lengths based on what's called a full frame camera. The Fujifilm X-T30, which by the way I have and I love, it's an amazing camera. That 35mm is equivalent to a 50mm lens. If you, Rusted 78, have any interest in street photography, I would suggest the 23mm f2. It's inexpensive, it's very good, it's water resistant, it's very tough, and it's extremely sharp. Now, I noticed that you mentioned, and it cut out, I couldn't see, but you talked about, I think, the 56mm. I don't have experience with that one. I use what's called the f2 series, and that's the 23mm f2, the 35mm f2, and the 50mm f2. This is a series of water-resistant, they're called WR lenses from Fujifilm, and I love them. They're cheap, they're extremely good, extremely lightweight, and I think they're great. So, if you are planning on another lens, I would encourage the 50mm f2 or the 23mm f2. I hope that helps. Okay, let's see what else we have. I'm going to go to the question mark. Okay, Rusted 78 says 56 or 23. Yes, so I would definitely suggest The 23 if you want to do any street photography. And if you want to get into portraiture, or upper body portraiture at least, I feel the 50mm f2 is great because it's cheap, but it also has, the f2 is decent. It'll give you enough background blur. It's not the best background blur, but it's certainly good for upper bodies, and it's also good for a certain amount of travel photography and nature. So those are my two suggestions. Thank you for the question. Okay, let's see what else we have here. From Emmy72, MEA. Do you recommend switching from LR Classic to LRCC? If so, do folders in the catalog transfer without any change happening? This is such a very important question, so please everybody listen up. If you are using Classic, Lightroom Classic, or maybe you even have Lightroom 7 or 6, and you want to switch to Lightroom CC, there's a very specific set of instructions that Adobe has on their website for you to follow. You have to follow it exactly. There's no cutting corners, please. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I didn't follow the instructions, and it made a mess of my collection. I had to restart it, which is a terrible pain. Please learn from my foolish mistake. Yes, you can do it, and it will transfer perfectly. Your collection will remain, the structure, the naming structure will carry over, but only if you follow the instructions from Adobe to the T. And all you have to do is go to adobe.com and do a search for Classic to CC conversion or whatever, and it'll pop up probably at the top. And if you follow the instructions, you'll be all set. Now, I guess the real question is, should you do it? And there's a great debate about that. I feel yes, mainly because I honestly don't feel that Adobe is going to maintain two versions of the same software forever. I think they will eventually, even though they say they're not currently, I feel that they eventually will get rid of Lightroom Classic, to be honest. Therefore, if you're going to switch over, why not switch over now rather than next year or 2 years from now when you have even more time invested in Classic? Anyway, it's up to you. There's really no good answer. A lot of people will say one thing or another. Because I love CC, because it's mobile, you get to edit on the bus, you get to edit on a boat, anywhere you want. I prefer CC. However, ultimately, it's based on whatever you choose. Luckily, you can actually switch over without too much hassle because Adobe's giving you exact instructions. Great question. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Thanks for joining, everybody. And if you just joined, it's a Q&A session, and I invite you to ask anything you want. But Insta Varun, but Lightroom Classic seems to still be the more powerful version, isn't it? Great question. Lightroom Classic still has a few more features. For example, it has the ability to print. It has the ability to create books. And Lightroom CC does not, at this point, have a very good printing capacity. So if you want to print from Lightroom CC, you're going to export your RAW plus your edits and send it to a printing company, or you're going to export those two files. One's an XRP and one is a RAW file. And you could actually just take it into Photoshop or take it into Lightroom Classic if you want, or you just get a professional to do that editing. Another thing is, if you like creating books and you like Lightroom's book creation software, Lightroom CC does not at this point allow for it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the only difference. And I've used Lightroom Classic for years. And then when Lightroom CC was released or introduced, I got it on the first day. I was a first adopter, an early adopter. And because it fits my lifestyle, because I travel a lot, the ability to edit on the go was just it was a real game changer for my career, because I could actually do a photo shoot and on the way back on the subway get the whole thing edited and sent to my client remotely. It was quite amazing. As far as I know, that's the only difference. So if those are critical to you, then still stay with Classic. However, the functionality being able to alter your picture, I think is pretty much similar, at least what I can remember. Great question. Okay, MEA72 says, thank you. I'm happy to help out. Okay, Simone Bates, Artist Canada, fellow Canadian. Any way to use Bluetooth to upload pics from a Nikon D3300? Yes. So Nikon Connect is the app that you're going to want, and you just get it from the App Store, whether if Google Play, of course, if you use Android, and if you use iPhone or an iPad. It's Nikon Connect. I think that's what it's called. And you just download it from the App Store. And I'm pretty sure the D3300 is part of allows for that. And what I would just do is just go to the Connect, and then you'll be able to see the supported cameras. If your camera is supported, then you're all set. Download the app and give it a try. And I'm sorry, I don't know right off if the 3300 does have that connectability. I think it does. Okay. Mark, you have great shots. That's from Big Wretch. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And by the way, sorry. With regards to recent shots, because I don't leave my house except for groceries pretty much, I've been doing inside my house photo edits using Adobe Photoshop Mix. And please look through my Instagram page. And I hope that those are inspirational for you. And I usually create on the second picture, just flip to the second picture, sort of before and after situation. So you can see the pictures that I use to create the mobile app art using my collection, my archives. And I want you guys to be able to do the same. And I started this because I really feel for the people who don't have, you may be in a high-rise apartment or something where you can't even open your windows during this quarantine, and I really feel bad about that. So I was really happy to think, how can I contribute to helping you guys stay creative? And I feel that mobile art is really great for that. And by the way, don't just use Adobe Photoshop Mix. The only reason I'm suggesting this is because it's free. There's a great app called Superimpose X and Superimpose. Superimpose is the first one. It only allows for a couple layers, but Superimpose X allows multiple layers, and it's really fun. And there's a whole bunch of apps that allow you to merge photos together to create art, and that's what I suggest for you guys. And if you're stuck, on my website, markhemmings.com, I actually teach something called iPhone Art Academy, and that goes through all the apps that you need to create iPhone art or Android art. Now, the course is based on iPhone, but these apps are all for Android as well. Okay, I'm just going to check the question mark down here. Yusuf says, my friend wants to buy a camera that performs very good on pictures. He's on a budget like $500. So if that's $500 US, what I suggest is take a look at Fujifilm X series, and because I'm always using I'm always telling people to start out with what's called the Fujifilm X T100, and that's $700 US. I would advise getting that used if possible, or getting any Fujifilm X series camera used, and that will go down to your $500 budget. Yusuf, I don't know where you're writing from, what country. So if you have access to a reputable camera store that sells used, then definitely that's my suggestion for your friend, because you'll be able to get a really good Fujifilm for $500. Now, if that fails, my next guess is probably a Sony mirrorless. And to be honest, even though I've used Sony commercially doing time lapses, I don't really know the current lineup that would be in that price range. However, I don't feel, unless you're getting a Canon Rebel, which I think is fine, I don't even know of any new camera systems that are in the $500 range, except for the Canon Rebel. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that Canon. By all means, get it. because it's new. You'd be able to get a kit lens with it. And I believe that Nikon has a very similar entry-level model that's within the $500 range. Sorry I couldn't be more clear, but those are my suggestions. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Thanks for joining, everybody. Okay, here's one. Begarach, I'm a starter on Olympus. Is this a normal camera? Yes, of course, Olympus is great. Now, the reason I think maybe why you're asking that question is because the Olympus has what's called a micro four thirds sensor. Now, probably a lot of you already know this. I apologize for going through the stuff that you already know, but maybe some of you don't, and this could be helpful. There are 3 common sensor sizes in cameras. Now, there's more, of course, but the most common that we encounter in our day-to-day photography, and if you're going to the camera store, the biggest one is called full frame. That's 35 millimeter. That's what you would get if you were to buy, for example, a film camera. Yes, the old style film cameras. Or a Nikon or a Canon or some Sonys that have a large and normal size sensor. Now, the smaller sensor is called APS-C. APS-C cameras. These have smaller sensors. And these would be the Fujifilm cameras, a lot of the Sony cameras, and a lot of the Nikon and Canon cameras that are what we call prosumer or consumer version, and as well some newer mirrorless Nikon and Canon mirrorless cameras. So these smaller sensors, let me see, how can I explain? I would say that probably the best feature of these is they allow for a smaller camera body because they are smaller sensors. And usually you would think, well, am I getting a worse quality because the sensor is small? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. For example, the Fujifilm and the Sony APS-Cs produce amazing quality even though the sensors are smaller. So don't be too afraid about a smaller APS-C sensor. Now, smaller still is what we call micro four thirds. And micro four thirds sensors have a great advantage with regards to those who love telephoto work because you can extend your telephoto viewing to a great extent because the smaller the sensor, the more telephoto effect you have in your lenses. So you could, for example, bird photographers or wildlife photographers really like these micro four thirds cameras such as Olympus, and I believe Panasonic Lumix also have micro four thirds. And it's really good for seeing distant objects far away. Now let's flip back to our full frame. Full frame cameras are extremely good for wide angle. And they have the advantage on wide angle shots. So architectural photographers and landscape photographers love full frame. Now, what about the middle of the road? Why would you ever choose a middle ground sensor, such as the APS-C, such as the Fujifilm or the Sony? Well, it's usually, for the Fujifilm crew, it's usually because of street photography. Street photographers love Fujifilm. And because the sensor's the middle of the road, it has great resolution, and it's small enough to be inconspicuous and not to be a target when you're out doing street or travel photography. Okay? I hope that helps, and it was a bit long, but hopefully you guys will get something out of that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the question mark. Rusted78, do you know a good source to buy used lenses? Rusted78, can you just tell me what country you're from, please? I'd appreciate it, and then I can answer you. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Sorry, my scrolling is bad. It's very hard to work this while I'm talking. Is this good for a beginner? Yes, the Olympuses are amazing. Definitely. Definitely. Okay, Yusuf, I have a friend of mine who wants to buy a camera that performs very good on pictures. Oh, I'm sorry, I already read that one. Sanjeev, guide me on a nice mirrorless camera. Presently, I'm using the ADD. I'm in India. Okay, the ADD is great. There's nothing wrong with the ADD. So if you feel that there's nothing technically wrong with your ADD, then just keep using it. And the reason I suggest this is I really don't want any of you to go into debt to buy new gear just because it's new, or new technology just because it's new. In fact, I still have what's called the X Pro 2 by Fujifilm, which in digital camera world is now becoming a dinosaur. But do you know what? Because it has not failed me, and because the pictures are still excellent, why bother, getting the new and even far better X Pro 3, even though of course it'd be nice to have that. But I do not spend money on objects that won't, how would you say it? They have to serve me. And for example, is this going to give me more profit, this camera, because it can do something that my previous camera can't do? Well, if that's the case, then I will think about investing. Or if you are not in photography for money, is this device that I'm spending money on, or going to be, is it going to give me more enjoyment out of life because my hobby can be advanced? If the answer is yes, then yes, by all means, consider putting money into the newer gear. But if the newer gear is not going to serve you, then don't waste your money, because the gear that you currently have is probably just fine. Use the gear that you have until you've exhausted it, until you've got to a point where it's not serving you anymore. And at that point, definitely invest in the latest and greatest if you have the budget. I hope that helps. By the way, I'm a clear advocate of Dave Ramsey. That's Daveramsey. He's the guy who helped me get out of debt. And I think about 5 years ago, I started listening to his podcast, DaveRamsey.com. And being debt-free is such a blessing. And especially now, by the way, I just want to throw this out. This is not photo related. But because so many people have lost their jobs during this COVID crisis, or have reduced hours, reduced income, now is the time, I feel, to download the podcast by Dave Ramsey. And he gives such excellent financial advice, and especially advice during crisis situations that we're all in now. For example, I'm a photographer. I'm not out doing photo shoots. So that part of my income disappeared overnight. It stopped. Now, I do have other sources of income, such as online courses at my website. That's good. But, of course, I'm going to be wise with my money because I don't know when this crisis is going to finish. So I also say that to you guys. Exhaust your current equipment before you buy new equipment. And when you buy new equipment, make sure that that's going to pay for itself, either through cash, through profit, or through what we call soul care. Your soul is being bettered because of this new device that will allow you to be, creative, allow you to daily exercise your creative muscle. That was a very long response. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Is Olympus a good camera? Yes. I think I already answered that. Okay, Lisa, what would be the best kind of laptop or desktop best suited to edit photos? Excellent question. Now, I apologize for everybody who uses PC computers here. And I want to be very clear because it's true that I'm an Apple fanboy, but I'm never going to tell people to buy gear just for the sake of a brand. The only problem is whenever I look at a PC laptop, what I see is a blue color cast on the screen, and I've never been able to figure out why that is. If anybody who uses PCs can answer that question, please tell me. And is it because all I see in the PC world are cheap laptops? Maybe. But the screens always have a blue color cast, and that really affects the ability to judge the color balance of a picture. So, for example, I was looking at editing a photo on a PC because within Lightroom CC you can actually do that. All you do is go to lightroom.adobe.com and log in, and you can work on your photos on any browser, on any computer. And I gave up because the PC screen, the laptop screen, had a blue color cast on it. And that will really skew your ability to judge white balance. And I'm not sure why that is. So I always suggest, if you have the budget to buy a Mac laptop, and you can buy used, by the way. There's no reason why you have to buy new, because I've used them well, let's see here. My very first Mac computer was when I started out 22 years ago, and the screens have always been near flawless. Another option, by the way, is if you're interested in getting the power of a Mac computer, is the Mac Mini. They're just little bricks, little cubes. That's where the computer is, and you can attach any screen to that. And if you make sure that you get a screen that has a neutral color balance that you test out first, then you'll be all set. But I do advise even a MacBook Air. And by the way, I just want to clarify something. Don't ever feel afraid to buy the cheapest Mac off the shelf. The cheapest Mac will still be able to process raw files in Lightroom CC. And how do I know this? Because I have a MacBook Air, the cheapest MacBook Air possible. In fact, I gave it to my daughters, and I can easily process my images, no problem. So don't ever feel that you need super high-end Macs to edit your photos. I just bought the one off the shelf. It was the cheapest, and it works just great. Hope that helped. Okay, so let's see what else we have. What would be the best, sorry, I already a question. I use Canon M6, and I'm thinking of getting another lens beside the kit lens. Which is better for street photography, 22 or 50? Great question. Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the M6 is an APS-C sized sensor. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if it is an APS-C, then you're going to want the 22 millimeter. And the reason being is if you take 22 and times it by 1.5, what you're going to be getting is roughly a 35 millimeter focal length. Okay, 22 plus 12 is 33 millimeters. So we would roughly say it's a 35 millimeter view. A 35 millimeter prime lens is ideal for street photography. In fact, that's the classic lens. That's what I use. So that's my suggestion for you. Now, if the Canon M6 is a full frame, and I should have done my homework on this, by the way, which I didn't. If the Canon M6 is a full frame, still get the 22 millimeter, okay? Because the 50 millimeter is still great. And let me correct that. If the M6 is full frame, both lenses will be fine. I personally would choose the 22. Okay, great question. Welcome everyone who's just joined. We're doing a Q&A session. Nazidan. Hi Mark, lots of love from Malaysia. And I would love to visit Malaysia. I think that, all I know from Malaysia is what I see from my favorite news app, which is NHK. And NHK is a Japanese news organization that I find really good because it doesn't have partisan bias. It presents the news. And I get glimpses of Malaysia from the app, the NHK app, which I really recommend, by the way. If you want to have news that it's not depressing all the time, then the NHK app and the live stream is really quite effective. And they do show little documentaries from Malaysia and other places as well. Insta Varun, what is the difference for you between processing and over-processing? I know it's a personal preference thing, but I would still like to know your opinion. Yes, over-processing is the thing that people fall into when they first get into editing, where the new style will come in and they'll go overboard. And if I look back at my 23-year career, these are some things that come to mind really quickly. Sepia tone, that was one. The other one was soft focus. Another one was having the red rose red, but everything else black and white. That was another one. HDR, about 7 years ago, it was really cool at start, but then it was just terribly garish because people would just jack up the HDR and it just looked ridiculous and muddy. Now, here's the interesting thing. The current style is called matte, M-A-T-T-E. And I'll be honest, it's still looking really good. I love it. I use it, but I use it very sparingly. So whenever you are putting either a filter or a profile or a preset onto your images, take it to where you think it looks good and then back off 20%. That's my advice. And you will be able to, if that 20% rule, I think, is very, very wise. What's going to do is going to give you that look that you like, but if you're a little bit unsure, that's going to allow a broader audience who may not really be really attracted to that look or that filter or that preset or that profile, and it's going to allow them to enjoy your picture a little bit more. So let me repeat that. When you're using a filter, profile, or preset, go to where you think you love, it looks great, and then back off 20%. And the nice thing is that all filters, as far as I know, at least in Lightroom and in Photoshop, and I think all the other smaller apps, you can actually reduce the opacity or the effect of that filter and just do it approximately 20% less and you'll be all set. What a great question. Okay, hi everybody, welcome. For those who just joined, we're doing a Q&A session. Bill, good to see you, my friend. And YG Photography. Hello, Mark. I'm a follower of yours since 2018. Oh, thank you. I will record a part of your life if you don't mind. Can you suggest a decent Canon or Nikon under 350 USD? I'm in France. I suggest that you look at the what is it, the Canon M series? And if anyone here has a Canon M series, please just type in the comment section which M series you have. Because I know that I trust Canon. I've used Canon for years. And the M series is actually looking pretty good because it's portable and it's small, it's not too expensive. And I think that it has a good ability to transition from genre to genre. Now, if you're looking for Nikon, I honestly don't know. Even though I have a Nikon, it's the D780, and it's really it's a bit more expensive than I was hoping to buy, and I'm not sure Nikon's lineup for under 350. However, check out the M series, and I think you'll find what you're looking for. Now, if you have the ability, because like maybe in Paris you have a reputable camera store that sells used cameras, I always suggest buying used. What you're getting is a better camera for a cheaper price, and if it goes through a used dealer, then they're going to actually have a certain amount of warranty on that used camera. Whether it be 6 months or a year, whatever their used warranty is, it's at least better than nothing. And that's my advice for you. So I hope that helps. I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful with a direct camera, body, and lens combo, but I think the M series is really good. Okay. Sagittariana Ashu. Sir, the way you deliver the courses are just amazing. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's always good to hear that. And by the way, what he's referring to is the courses that I have at markhemmings.com. And I have 4 courses currently, and more to come actually. 4 courses on DSLR mirrorless cameras, plus 1 on editing your iPhone photos to create artwork, and that's called iPhone Art Academy. Feel free to check them out. Hey everybody, just giving you guys waves. Thank you for joining. Danny, good to see you, Danny, my friend. Please feel free, Danny, and any of you to ask any questions at all. Takumi, great to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining. By the way, I don't know if you guys can see Takumi0201, but if you tap on his profile, you'll see amazing aircraft and airline related photos. Okay, welcome everybody. Hello, the Sanjay. Hello back to you. Lisa, thank you so much. That was really helpful, great info. Takumi, hello my friend. Konnichiwa. Hi from the Philippines. Thanks everybody. Oh, Lynn, hi, welcome. It's so nice to see you all, and thanks for joining. Insta Varun, good 20% rule. Yes, that's what I suggest to everyone, actually. Now, I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel that I've done it so many times that I actually know the exact dialed in amount for a profile or a preset. However, when you are still feeling a little bit maybe reticent, then that 20% rule is really good. Tom LaJones, good to see you again. I'm Canon M50 here. For first time to use the camera with lens. What's the difference between 15 to 45 and 22? What a great question. Susie Girl 027. And for those, I don't know if you guys are able to see what I see. I can actually see all the questions here. I don't know if you can or not, but it's a great question. She has a 15 to 45 kit lens. And what about that 22? What's the difference? Well, the 22 is called a prime lens. It doesn't zoom, and it's smaller. It's lighter, usually. Well, that's not always the case, but usually the case. And it's sharper. Now, the reason it's sharper is because there's less moving objects. There's less glass. There's less lenses inside the lens body. And what that means is that you can actually have a longer life to that lens because there's less moving parts. And because the f-stop, or we could say the f-stop is low, or the aperture is wider, meaning a larger opening for light to get in, you can actually get more background blur. So if you have the 22, you're going to use that for street photography. Also, what I would advise, let me think here. It's not so great, to be honest, for headshots. However, if you're going to be doing any portrait photography, maybe upper body. So I'm just thinking like maybe waist to here. Then that 22 lens, if you go to the lowest f-stop number, is going to provide a nice background blur, which is quite rare for a lens that is fairly wide. Now, the 22 lens would probably be better suited for full body. It's actually really good for landscapes, and it's really good for architecture as well. Now, because your 15 to 45 zoom lens already incorporates the 22 millimeter, in a sense, like you can go 15 millimeter, 20, 22, 40, 45. You may be inclined to say, well, maybe the 22 is just extra that I don't even need. I would suggest keep it and use it because a prime lens usually gives you a better quality picture overall. Hope that helps. And by the way, everybody, I have 1 minute left because Instagram shuts this whole thing off at 60 minutes, and we're at 59 minutes right now. So what I would ask all of you to do is come back tomorrow at 12 o'clock Toronto, Canada time, and that's called EST, and that's Eastern Standard Time. And please keep your questions, bring them back tomorrow, and we will continue again. So, I just got that reminder on top of my screen that I only have 1 minute and 53 remaining. So I'm going to say goodbye, and God bless you all. Stay safe, and happy Easter, and happy Passover. See you tomorrow.